let's delve a bit deeper into this HS2 announcement. It looks to me that it's a real political hot potato, isn't it? George Osborne, Andy Burnham, Lord Heseltine, sort of the great figures of both the Conservative and the Labour Party. Jake Berry, I wasn't asked to sign the letter, but the great figures of the Conservative and Labour Party have written to the Prime Minister today to tell him he's got this wrong. Are they right?
100% he's got it wrong. I mean, I think, as you say, we sort of seem to be, we're kind of getting it completely wrong, aren't we? We're sort of making long-term cuts for short-term and long-term pain, which I don't think is very good for anyone. The Conservatives stood on a manifesto of levelling up, as you well know, and one of the key ways of doing that is improving the transport connections and infrastructure in the north of England. And whether we're talking about delay or even scrapping the thing, is a huge betrayal of that manifesto promise, and also massive, and the country urgently needs it. And if we want to ensure that communities and our northern communities and the Midlands thrive, and we don't have this culture where you have to live in the southeast of England to work in certain professions and have a certain standard of living, we need to ensure that connectivity is improved across our country. And the dither and delay that we're talking about is just jeopardising that, and the costs are astronomical. And there's a whole separate conversation about how this has been allowed to be so poorly managed and costing us in the hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions. But ultimately, we need it, and the talk today about scrapping it or delaying it, I think, is deeply disappointing.
Well, look, let me query: do we need it though? Because I get the train from home to London, Stockport Station to London Euston, twice a week. And it used to be a 11 or 12 car Virgin Pendolino, now Avanti West Coast, but still the Pendolino train. That's now dropped down to 9 carriages rather than 12. And often I have an entire carriage to myself. It's absolutely empty. And the government's putting huge amounts of subsidies into our railways, basically to ship fresh air between London and Manchester every 20 minutes. Maybe the world's just changed. This was first proposed in 2006 by the then Labour government. It was then taken on by David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, and latterly Rishi Sunak, although he looks like he's going to change it. But the world has changed. All the good jobs aren't in London and the South East anymore. There's great jobs in Birmingham, Manchester, Newcastle and places like that. And if you want to take one of those jobs, you can pretty much be wherever you are in the country, can't you? Can't we just all work remotely? So maybe Rishi's doing the right thing.
Well, maybe you can work remotely, but increasingly we're seing employers are sort of, falling out of love with that model, and they want people to come back. We're seeing kind of firms up and down the country coming up with schemes to get people back at their desk. And also we're talking about the quality of the infrastructure. I mean, you said yourself, some of these rail lines were built under Queen Victoria, so it's time they got a bit of a facelift. You can only imagine, and we need to be competitive with our European neighbours. We can't have crumbling train infrastructure when we're supposed to be going it alone, and see our kind of internal and national transports being, vastly lapped and looked down on by our European neighbours. We should want to have high-speed quality rail services for everyone in this country, as a matter of national pride. And of course, people can work from home, but we should also be able to nurture communities across this nation, so that you don't have to work from home, so that, firms, all kinds of industries can thrive in the Midlands and the North. And you can't say you're going to do something, and then when the going gets a bit tough, and because you can't organise it well enough, cancel it. You can't betray, there is no mandate for getting rid of HS2 or for even delaying it. And if he wants that, he needs to call an election.
Right, OK, well, I'm going to tell you what I think about HS2. So I've got to the point, a project that was meant to be 30 million quid and is now looking like it's billion, and it's now going to be over 100 billion, with a exiting chief executive, who was paid a staggering £617,000, 300 quid, plus £5,400 worth of additional benefits. I'm not quite sure what they were. It's probably a car or something. We wouldn't be getting the train. This project has just got out of control. Surely it's right, Rishi looks at it. Where I would draw the line is Northern Powerhouse Rail. And as someone who's lived and worked in the North my whole life, I'm more bothered about getting from Liverpool to Hull or to Newcastle or wherever else it may be, east to west, is intrinsically linked to this second phase of HS2. So I've got a compromise for you. I hope you're listening. I know, Becca, you are, but maybe, Rishi, you're listening to me. What about the compromise is we just don't build HS2 north of Birmingham, but we immediately commenced that east-west connectivity, Northern Powerhouse Rail, or as one of my colleagues, John Stevenson, brilliantly called it, the Charles Line, to get people across the north of England. That's much, much better than wasting, you know, several tens of billions of pounds more on a fast lane to London, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that sounds eminently quite sensible. And I think you're right. You know, this is a project that, you know, has aged. As you say, you know, it was commissioned in the dim and distant past. The UK, what we need, you know, is very different now. But I think what's important is that we can't just retract from the promise of trying to level up. And so it might be that the needs have changed, but the commitment needs to remain. And I think kind of just delaying it for an indefinite period of time or scrapping the whole thing doesn't meet that promise. So, yeah, potentially it is a redrawing of the route, but the level of investment and the importance and the prioritisation shouldn't be up for debate.
Becca, I don't want to spoil your fun here, but it sounds like you almost agree with me. They're going mad in the box in front of me. It's unheard of for anyone to say that it might be quite sensible, whatever I say. Look, so let's wait and see where we get to that. Also this week, the big announcement, this sort of backing down on the long-term promises, as people might say, to appeal to the older voter, which is our big question today. Is this sort of rowing back, not on the commitment to net zero? Rishi's been absolutely clear we'll still hit it by 2050, but some of the nuts and bolts of it. So you were going to be banned from buying a petrol or diesel vehicle brand new in 2030. There was a new ban on, I think, oil-fired boilers from 2026. Big issue if you're off-grid and you don't have gas and you live in an older property. Now, he's to some extent ratcheted back on that. Now, to me, knocking on doors and talking to people, I think that's going to be quite popular, especially with those older voters. What do you think, Becca?
I think kind of almost environmental concerns aside, because I think, you know, I think is utterly reckless, what he's suggesting that we should do. We do not have 5 years, 10 years on our side to combat climate. We don't, and to save the planet without trying to be too dramatic. But it's that sort of short-term game that's going to result in an awful lot of long-term pain, because we've taken away all the impetus, all the drive, all the ambition for our industry to create jobs. You know, we know that countries around the world, our European neighbours, America, India, China, they all want those contracts for electric vehicles. They all want to look at hydrogen. They all want to get into green energy. And we're just kicking back and saying, oh, do you know what, guys? You can count Britain out on this one. And we need those jobs. We need that investment. You know,
you're right.
Biden is turning the Rust Belt into the kind of electric vehicle belt. You know, India is investing huge amounts of research into technologies, and we're just kind of slowing down. So while, yeah, maybe it means that you can keep that car for a little bit longer, or, you know, you don't have to, change your boiler. But ultimately, this is going to cost UK PLC a kind of an unfathomable sum of money. And we just are going to allow ourselves, like I said earlier, to get lapped by our neighbours. And that isn't good enough. You know, we've prided ourselves on, you know, being a head and shoulder above France and Germany, but they're going to build these gigafactories and we aren't, and we're going to get left behind. So I thought it was an act of kind of economic self-harm as well as a betrayal of the environment. But I think it's very clear
that... Becca, you would accurately reflect the findings of the Ipsos Mori poll, because you think it's bad, I think it's good. Apparently, according to Ipsos Mori, we accurately reflect the country, because they are split 47-46. 47% think Rishi was right to roll back some of the commitments. 46% think he was wrong. I'll take that, to be honest. I always like being on the winning side. Politics is about getting more votes than anyone else. Look, thank you very much.